Dr. Elena Martinez spent 15 years studying ocean creatures. When Mount Rinjani erupted, the tsunami threw her onto a volcanic island, ringed by fire and boiling sea. Her team was gone. She had a torn wetsuit, cuts on her ribs, and 2 days before dehydration killed her. No water, no shelter, no rescue coming. This is how a marine biologist survived what should have killed her in 48 hours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena woke that morning at 6:47, exactly 13 minutes before her alarm. The research vessel Coral Star rocked gently in the Lombok Strait, and through the porthole she could see Mount Rinjani's silhouette against the pink dawn sky. She'd watched that volcano every morning for 3 weeks. Beautiful and dormant, the locals said. Nothing to worry about. She pulled on her wetsuit in the cramped cabin, the neoprene still damp from yesterday's dive. Her body moved through the routine automatically. 15 years of field research had turned preparation into muscle memory. Wetsuit, booties, weight belt, BCD. Check the regulator. Test the octopus backup. Verify tank pressure. 3,000 psi. Perfect for a 2-hour dive. Captain Samir was already on deck, drinking coffee that smelled like burnt rubber and checking his instruments. He'd been navigating these waters for 40 years, knew every reef and current. Morning, Doc. Sleep well? Well enough. Elena secured her tank to the BCD harness. Jake up yet? Your student's been up since 5, throwing up over the rail. Kid's still not used to the swells. Elena smiled. Jake Chen was 26. Brilliant with data analysis. Useless on boats. She'd brought him anyway because his dissertation on coral bleaching patterns was the best work she'd seen in a decade. Where's Yuki? Below deck, staring at his seismograph like it insulted his mother. Samir's voice dropped. He's been twitchy all morning, keeps talking about tremors. Dr. Yuki Tanaka appeared on deck right on cue, laptop in hand, his face tight with concern. Elena, we need to talk about the readings. We've been over this. Elena hoisted her tank onto her back, clicking the buckles. Seismic activity's been elevated for weeks. It's a volcano. They do that. These numbers are different. The frequency, the intensity. We have 4 days left in our research window. The monsoon season starts next week, and we won't get another shot at this site for 6 months. She pulled her dive mask down around her neck. I've got funding that expires in August, and a paper deadline that won't wait for perfect conditions. Yuki's jaw tightened. Science doesn't care about your deadlines. Then it's lucky I'm the one making the call. Elena regretted the words immediately. Too harsh. But the pressure was real. 3 grant proposals rejected. Her tenure review coming up. This coral mapping project was supposed to be her proof of concept for a larger study. She needed this data. Jake stumbled on deck, pale but determined, already in his wetsuit. Ready when you are, Dr. Martinez. Elena checked her dive computer, synchronized it with Jake's. We'll stay at 60 feet. Map the eastern quadrant. 2 hours max. Samir keeps the boat within visual range. She looked at Yuki. We'll be back before lunch. If your mountain wants to blow, it can wait until after we finish the survey grid. Yuki didn't smile. Mountains don't wait for anyone. Elena and Jake stepped to the rail, regulators in mouths, and rolled backward into the water. The underwater world swallowed them in blue silence. Elena equalized her ears as they descended, watching her depth gauge tick past 20 feet, 30, 40. The water temperature dropped from warm to cool against her exposed skin. At 60 feet, she leveled off and gave Jake the okay signal. The reef spread below them like an alien city. Coral, formations in yellow, purple, and brown, created towers and valleys. A school of parrotfish scattered as Elena approached, their scales catching the filtered sunlight. She pulled out her underwater camera and started documenting. This was what she lived for: the quiet, the focus, the pure science of observation. Jake swam beside her, taking readings with the water quality monitor. Every 10 meters they stopped, and he recorded temperature, salinity, pH levels. Elena photographed coral colonies, noting which ones showed bleaching, which looked healthy. Her research centered on one question: why did some corals survive environmental stress while others died? The answer could help predict which reefs might weather climate change. 40 minutes into the dive, something changed. Elena noticed it first in the fish. A large grouper that had been hovering near a coral head suddenly bolted toward open water. Then the parrotfish disappeared. Within seconds, the reef that had been teeming with life went still. She checked her dive computer. Plenty of air, no reason for concern, but her instincts screamed otherwise. The water temperature gauge on Jake's monitor jumped 3 degrees in less than a minute. He tapped it, thinking it was malfunctioning. Tapped it again. The reading climbed another 2 degrees. He showed Elena, his eyes wide behind his mask. Warm water, rising fast. That meant either an underwater volcanic vent opening nearby, or something worse. Elena's pulse kicked up, burning through her air faster. She signaled Jake. Surface, now. They started ascending, following protocol, stopping at 30 feet for a safety check. That's when Elena felt it. A vibration through the water, low frequency, almost subsonic. It rattled her chest cavity. Jake felt it too. He looked at her, questioning. The vibration intensified. Then the water itself seemed to shudder. Elena abandoned the safety stop and kicked hard for the surface. Jake followed. 20 feet. 15. The pressure in her ears built as they rose too fast, but she didn't care. 10 feet. 5. They broke the surface together, ripping their regulators out. Elena spun, looking for the coral star. Found it 200 yards away. Samir was on deck, waving his arms, shouting something she couldn't hear over the sound of her own breathing. Then she heard it, a deep rumble, like thunder trapped underground. She turned toward Mount Rinjani. The entire peak exploded. Not gradually, not with warning. 1 second the mountain was there, solid and ancient. The next, its top third disintegrated in a blast of rock and superheated gas. The shockwave hit her ears a moment later, so loud it felt like being punched. "Swim!" Elena screamed at Jake. "Swim now!" But even as they kicked toward the boat, she knew. She'd studied enough geology. When a volcano exploded like that, the ocean didn't stay calm. The pyroclastic flow would hit the water. The water would flash to steam. And then the wave would come. Samir had already started the engines. Elena could hear them roaring even from 100 yards out. She and Jake swam harder than they'd ever swum in their lives. Arms burning, legs kicking against the weight of their gear. Every second counted. Every stroke brought them closer to the boat and further from the volcano, spewing destruction behind them. The water around them started heating up. Not gradually. Fast enough that Elena felt it through her wetsuit. The ocean was absorbing energy from the pyroclastic flow hitting the coastline 3 miles away. Steam rose in patches across the surface. "Elena!" Samir's voice carried across the water. "Faster!" She didn't waste breath responding, just swam. Jake pulled ahead of her, younger, stronger. "Good. Get to the boat, kid." One of them needed to make it. They reached the coral star within 90 seconds. Felt like 90 hours. Samir threw a ladder over the side. Jake grabbed it first, hauling himself up, tank and all. Elena was right behind him, her muscles screaming. Samir grabbed her BCD harness and physically dragged her over the rail. "Go!" Elena gasped. "Just go!" Samir had the throttle open before she finished speaking. The boat lurched forward, engines straining. Elena rolled onto her back, still wearing her tank, trying to catch her breath. Through the gaps in the deck railing, she could see the volcano. The entire mountain was hidden behind a black cloud that rose miles into the sky. Lightning flickered inside it, violet and white. Yuki appeared above her, helping her sit up. "I told you. Not now." Elena fumbled with her BCD buckles. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't get the clips undone. Yuki did it for her, lifting the tank off her back. It hit the deck with a clang. "Where are we going?" Jake asked Samir. He was still on his knees, breathing hard. "Away!" Samir spun the wheel hard to port. "Just away!" Elena stood on unsteady legs and looked behind them. The pyroclastic flow had reached the coast. She could see the grey-black cloud racing across the water, moving impossibly fast. 50 miles per hour, maybe 60. It would cook everything it touched, turn the ocean to steam, incinerate any boat caught in its path. "We can't outrun that," Yuki said quietly. "We're not going to." Samir pointed ahead. "We're going around. There's a chain of small islands 2 miles east. We get behind them, use them as a barrier." "That's not how pyroclastic flows work," Yuki said. "They don't stop for islands." "No, but they slow down. Break up. We need 30 seconds. That's all." Elena moved to the bow, gripping the rail. The water ahead looked normal, calm, blue, like the world wasn't ending 3 miles behind them. She could see the islands Samir mentioned, low, rocky, covered in sparse vegetation. They looked tiny, insignificant. The coral star was doing maybe 20 knots. Engines pushed past their recommended limit. Black smoke poured from the exhaust. Behind them, the pyroclastic flow hit the ocean in full force. The sound was like a freight train mixed with a bomb. The water didn't just heat up. It exploded into steam, creating its own shockwave. "Hold on," Samir screamed. The wave caught them from behind. Not water, steam and pressure and heat. It picked up the coral star like a toy and threw it forward. Elena's grip on the rail broke. She flew through the air, weightless, the boat tumbling beside her. She saw Jake spinning past, saw Yuki hit the water, saw Samir still gripping the wheel as the cabin disintegrated around him. Then she hit something hard, and everything went black. Pain woke her, sharp and specific, radiating from her left ribs. Elena opened her eyes to black sand pressed against her cheek. Her mouth tasted like copper and salt, blood and ocean. She tried to breathe and agony lanced through her chest. Cracked rib. Maybe 2. She pushed herself up on her hands. Her arms shook. Everything hurt. She got to her knees and vomited seawater, retching until nothing came up but bile. When the spasms stopped, she sat back and looked around. Black sand stretched in both directions. Volcanic rock. Behind her, waves crashed against the shore, but the water boiled in places, steam rising where superheated rock met the sea. The sky was dark grey, thick with ash. She couldn't see the sun. The island was small, maybe half a mile across. Jagged volcanic formations jutted from the center like broken teeth. No trees, no visible vegetation, just rock and ash and black sand. Elena looked down at herself. Her wetsuit was shredded across the right shoulder and left thigh. Blood seeped from cuts on her exposed skin. Her dive booties were still on. Her weight belt was gone. So was her BCD, her tank, her mask, her fins. She had the torn wetsuit and nothing else. Her dive watch was still on her wrist. The crystal was cracked, water inside, but the hands still moved. 3:15. She'd been underwater at 8:30, unconscious for almost 7 hours. She stood slowly, testing her legs. They worked, bruised but functional. Her ribs screamed with every breath, but she could move. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the beach for any sign of her team. Nothing. No bodies. No debris. No pieces of the coral star. "Jake!" Her voice came out as a croak. She tried again, louder. "Samir, Yuki." Only the sound of waves answered, and the distant rumble of the volcano. Elena walked the length of the beach. Her legs felt like concrete. Every step hurt. She found a piece of the boat's railing half buried in sand. A life preserver melted on one side. A plastic cooler lid. Nothing useful. No survival kit. No emergency beacon. No radio. She completed the circuit and stopped where she'd started. Alone. Her team was gone. Dead or swept to another island, but gone. The boat was destroyed. No one knew exactly where they'd been diving. The eruption would have disrupted all communications. Search and rescue would focus on populated areas, not random research vessels. She looked at the water. A larger landmass, maybe 3 miles away. But between here and there, the ocean still boiled in patches, and she had no fins, no flotation, and cracked ribs. Elena turned toward the island's interior. The volcanic rock formations created shadows, possible shelter. She needed to assess resources, food, water, especially water. She started walking inland, each breath a reminder of her injuries. The black sand gave way to rough volcanic rock that cut through her thin booties. Pain meant she was alive, and staying alive meant taking inventory of what this island could give her, which, from what she could see, was absolutely nothing. The island's interior was a maze of sharp volcanic rock and shallow depressions. Elena picked her way through carefully, testing each foothold. The rock was new, geologically speaking, probably formed within the last 100 years. That meant no soil development, no plants, no water sources from rainfall collection. She found a cave formation within 20 minutes, more of an overhang. A slab of cooled lava had created a shelter about 6 feet deep and 4 feet high. She ducked inside, grateful to be out of the harsh sunlight breaking through the ash clouds. The cave offered shade and protection from wind. Elena sat on the cave floor and forced herself to think like a scientist. She needed 3 things: water, shelter, and food. She had shelter. Food could wait. The human body could go 3 weeks without food, but water was critical. 3 days maximum. In this heat, probably less. She ran her tongue across her cracked lips, already dehydrated from the ocean water she'd swallowed. She needed fresh water within 24 hours, or her kidneys would start shutting down. Elena crawled back out and continued exploring. She climbed to the island's highest point, a rocky outcrop maybe 50 feet above sea level. From there, she had a 360 view. The volcano was still erupting. Ash fell like grey snow. The larger island she'd spotted had fires burning along its coast. No rescue boats, no planes. Nothing but smoke and ash and boiling ocean. She scanned for any hint of green. There, in a depression between 2 rock formations, something darker than the surrounding rock. Elena climbed down and made her way toward it. The rocks tore at her feet. She reached the depression and found a shallow tide pool, maybe 3 feet across. Salt water, useless for drinking. But tide pools meant marine life. She knelt beside it and looked closer. Small crabs scuttled between rocks. Sea urchins clung to the stone. A small fish darted between shadows. Food. Not much, but something. Her marine biology degree was about to earn its keep in ways her professors never intended. She knew which sea urchins were edible and which were toxic. The crabs were safe. The fish could be eaten raw if necessary, but catching them without tools would be difficult, and eating without fresh water would accelerate her dehydration. Water first. Always water first. If ocean water reached this far inland during high tide, there might be other pools, deeper ones, and if she was lucky, one might have collected rainwater before the eruption. She found 2 more tide pools within the next hour, both saltwater, both with minimal marine life. The sun was getting lower. She'd been awake for maybe 3 hours since regaining consciousness. Her body was screaming for water. Her head ached. Her mouth felt like sandpaper. Elena made her way back to the cave as the light faded. Tomorrow, she'd expand her search. Tonight, she needed to conserve energy. She sat in the cave entrance and watched the sky darken. The volcano glowed red in the distance. She was alone on a rock in the middle of hell. And she had maybe 40 hours before dehydration killed her. The temperature dropped fast after sunset. Elena hadn't expected that. The volcanic rock radiated heat during the day and released it after dark, but without vegetation or soil to hold warmth, the air turned cold. Not freezing, but cold enough that her wet, torn wetsuit became a liability. She huddled deeper into the cave, arms wrapped around her knees. Her body shivered. The shivers made her ribs hurt worse. Her core temperature was dropping. The wetsuit was still damp, conducting heat away from her skin. She needed to get it off, but then she'd have no protection from the rock floor. Elena peeled the wetsuit down to her waist, leaving her upper body exposed, except for her sports bra. The air felt colder against bare skin, but at least the damp neoprene wasn't touching her torso. She used the wetsuit top as a cushion, sitting on it to insulate herself from the cold stone. Better. Not good, but better. The night sounds started, crabs clicking across rocks, the distant rumble of the volcano, waves crashing, and her own breathing, the sound of air moving through her damaged ribs, amplified by the cave walls. She thought about her team, Jake, who got seasick but came anyway, Yuki, who tried to warn her, Samir, who'd done everything right and still couldn't save them. Were they dead? Probably. Maybe they'd made it to another island. Maybe they were huddled in their own caves. Maybe was a dangerous word. Eleanor's thoughts turned to water. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Her headache had intensified. Her tongue was swollen. Moderate dehydration, approaching severe. By morning she'd be in serious trouble. She'd read about people dying of thirst. The body shut down system by system. Kidneys first, then the brain. Hallucinations, seizures, eventually coma and death. 3 days was the average, but she'd been exposed to salt water, had physical trauma, was burning energy staying warm. She might have 2 days. Stop it. Think about solutions. Water sources on volcanic islands, rainwater collection in rock depressions, underground springs, condensation from temperature differences, plant moisture. She'd found no plants. The rock depressions were contaminated with salt water. That left condensation, morning dew. It formed when air temperature dropped and moisture condensed on cool surfaces. The volcanic rock would cool overnight. If she could collect the dew before sunrise, she might get enough to buy another day. She needed collection surfaces, smooth rocks that would hold water droplets. She'd have to find them at first light and pray that enough dew formed. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. Elena lay down on her side, using the wadded wetsuit top as a pillow. The cave floor was hard and cold. Every position hurt her ribs. She found one that hurt slightly less and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come. Her body was too uncomfortable, her mind too active. She lay in the darkness and listened to the volcano rumble and tried not to think about water. She tried to remember her last drink of fresh water, the coffee on the boat that morning. 1 cup, black, probably 8 ounces. Before that, a bottle of water at dawn, maybe 12 ounces, total in the last 18 hours. Her body had been operating on a deficit even before the tsunami hit. Now that deficit was becoming critical. Her urine had been dark amber the last time she'd gone, hours ago. Soon, her kidneys would stop producing it altogether. That's when the real damage would start. Toxins building in her blood, organs failing one by one. She had less time than she thought. This story takes time to craft. If you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena woke in the dark, disoriented. For a moment she thought she was in her apartment in Jakarta. Then pain reminded her where she was. Her ribs ached. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed glass. She sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. The sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn, maybe an hour away. Perfect timing for dew collection. She crawled out of the cave, her body stiff from the cold night. The air was cool, and she could see moisture on the volcanic rocks, small droplets clinging to smooth surfaces. She needed containers. Elena searched the area around her cave in the dim light. Most rocks were too porous, but there, a section of rock with a natural depression, smooth and bowl-shaped, maybe 6 inches across and 2 inches deep. She found 3 more within 20 minutes, positioned them where the dew was thickest. Then she used her hands to carefully brush water droplets from surrounding rocks into the depressions. Each droplet was precious. The work was tedious and painful. Bending over made her ribs scream. Her fingers were clumsy from dehydration, but she kept going. Brush, collect, move to the next rock. By the time the sun broke through the ash clouds, she'd collected maybe 2 tablespoons of water in the largest depression. 2 tablespoons. Nowhere near enough. Elena knelt beside the rock bowl and stared at the tiny amount of water. She could drink it now, or save it, and ration it. 2 tablespoons wouldn't save her life, but it might keep her functional long enough to find a real water source. She brought her face close to the water and licked it up slowly, making each drop last. The moisture felt like heaven on her swollen tongue. When the depression was empty, she sat back, still thirsty, still dying, but alive for now. The sun was getting hot fast. Elena stood and looked toward the tide pool she'd found yesterday. Food. She needed to eat something, even if it accelerated her dehydration. Her body needed energy to keep searching for water. She made her way to the nearest pool. The crabs scattered, but the sea urchins couldn't run. Elena knelt and reached in, grabbing one carefully to avoid the spines. She'd done this 100 times on research dives. Never thought she'd be collecting breakfast. She used a sharp rock to crack the urchin shell. Inside was the roe, orange and soft. She scooped it out with her fingers and put it in her mouth. The taste was intensely briny, almost overwhelming, but it was protein and fat. Elena ate 3 more urchins, working mechanically. Each one made her thirst worse. The salt content was high. She'd pay for this later, but starvation would kill her just as dead as dehydration. She moved to the next tide pool and spotted movement. The small fish from yesterday. It darted between rocks, quick and nervous. She needed a way to catch it, a spear. Elena searched the area and found a piece of driftwood, probably thrown here by the tsunami, about 3 feet long, thumb thick. One end had broken into a relatively sharp point. She spent an hour trying to spear that fish. The driftwood was clumsy, and her depth perception was off in the rippling water. She'd thrust down, the fish would dart away, and she'd hit nothing but rock. Her frustration built with each miss. Her body was weakening. On the 23rd attempt, she got lucky. The fish zigged when it should have zagged, and the spear point caught it against a rock. Elena grabbed it before it could escape. She had food. The fish was maybe 4 inches long. Not much meat, but every calorie mattered. She used the sharp rock to scale and gut it. The process was messy. She'd eaten sushi plenty of times. This was different. This was survival. Elena bit into the raw flesh. It was chewy and tasted strongly of the ocean. Her stomach lurched. She forced herself to chew and swallow. Protein, nutrients her body needed. She ate the entire fish, including the organs. Couldn't afford to waste anything. When she finished, she rinsed her hands in the tide pool and sat back. The sun was directly overhead now. Brutal. She needed to get out of it. Her skin was already burning. Sunburn on top of dehydration would be deadly. Elena made her way back to the cave, moving slower than before. The food sat heavy in her stomach. Without water to aid digestion, her body was struggling. She could feel the nausea building. Don't throw up. If she vomited, she'd lose precious fluids and calories. She reached the cave and collapsed in its shade. The temperature inside was at least 10 degrees cooler. She lay on her side, waiting for the nausea to pass. It took 20 minutes. When her stomach finally settled, she allowed herself to relax slightly. 2 problems solved: shelter and food. One problem remained, and it was the one that would kill her. Water. Elena's mind worked through the possibilities again. Morning dew had given her maybe an ounce. Not sustainable. The tide pools were salt water. She needed to find fresh water or create a way to desalinate ocean water. Desalination without equipment. Was it possible? Solar stills could be built with plastic and containers to collect condensation. But she had no plastic, no containers, just rock and a torn wetsuit. Wait, the wetsuit. It was synthetic material, waterproof. If she could create a depression in the rock, line it with wetsuit material, fill it with salt water, and cover it with more material, the sun might heat it enough to evaporate the water. The fresh water vapor would condense on the covering and drip into a collection point. Solar stills were notoriously inefficient. With improvised equipment, she might get a few ounces per day. Maybe. But a few ounces was better than nothing. Elena sat up, energized by having a plan. She'd need somewhere with direct sunlight most of the day. A rock depression that was naturally bowl-shaped, and she'd have to sacrifice her wetsuit. That meant no protection from the sun or cold. But dying from exposure was slower than dying from dehydration. She crawled out of the cave and started searching. The sun hammered down. Her vision blurred at the edges. Dehydration was progressing. She had maybe 24 hours left. Elena found the spot on the eastern side of the island. A natural bowl in the volcanic rock, about 2 feet across and 6 inches deep. The location got direct sun from sunrise until mid-afternoon. She sat beside the depression and looked at her wetsuit. The neoprene was thick. It would work as a waterproof liner, but cutting it would be hard. She had one sharp rock. Elena started with the already torn section on her shoulder. The rock sawed through slowly. Her hands cramped. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She kept cutting. After 30 minutes, she had a square piece about 18 inches on each side. She placed the neoprene in the rock bowl, smoothing it down. The edges came up over the rim. She weighted them with small stones. Then she walked to the nearest tide pool and started carrying water back in her cupped hands. It took 47 trips. She counted each one. Her legs trembled. Her vision kept tunneling. But she kept going. Fill hands with salt water. Walk back. Pour water into the lined depression. Return for more. When the bowl was 3/4 full, she stopped. She cut another piece from her wetsuit, about 12 inches square. She stretched it across the top of the bowl and weighted the edges with rocks, leaving it slightly slack in the middle. Then, she placed one small pebble in the center, creating a low point where condensed water would collect and drip. Finally, she positioned a shell directly under that low point inside the bowl. The condensed fresh water would drip into the shell. Elena sat back and examined her work. The theory was sound. Sun heats the salt water. Water evaporates. Fresh water vapor rises and condenses on the cooler covering. The droplets run to the low point and drip into the shell. Simple physics. But theory and reality were different. The sun had to be hot enough. The temperature differential had to be significant. The seal had to be good. A dozen variables could ruin it. She had no choice but to wait. The sun was past its peak now. She'd check the still at sunset. If it worked, there might be enough water to keep her alive another day. If it didn't, she'd need a new plan fast. Elena stood and immediately regretted it. Her head spun. Black spots danced across her vision. She dropped to her knees, waiting for the dizziness to pass. When her vision cleared, she crawled back to the cave. Walking was too risky. The cave felt like an oven. Elena collapsed on her side and closed her eyes. Her body screamed for water. Her throat was raw. Her lips had split open and were bleeding. She tried to sleep. Couldn't. Her mind kept running through worst-case scenarios. The still fails. No water tomorrow. Organs start shutting down. Dies alone on this rock. Stop it. Think about success. The still works. You get water. You survive another day. You find more water. You signal for rescue. You make it home. Home. Her apartment in Jakarta had never felt like home. Just a place to sleep between research trips. Her parents were dead. No siblings. No husband or kids. Her whole life had been her work. Her team had been her family. And now they were gone too. Elena's eyes burned, but no tears came. She was too dehydrated to cry. That realization made her want to laugh and scream at the same time. Too dried out to mourn properly. She thought about Jake, probably dead in the water. Yuki, who'd been right about everything. Samir, who'd tried his best to save them all. She owed it to them to survive. If she died here, nobody would know what happened to the coral star. Nobody would know they'd tried to outrun a volcano and failed. She had to live long enough to tell their story. Elena woke to pain that made everything else feel minor. Her left leg was on fire. She sat up fast, and her vision greyed out. When it cleared, she looked down and saw the problem. The cut on her thigh from the tsunami had turned ugly. The edges were red and swollen, radiating heat. A thin line of red traced up toward her hip. Infection spreading through her lymphatic system. She touched the skin around the wound. Hot, tight. When she pressed gently, pus oozed out. The smell hit her immediately. Sweet and rotten. That smell meant serious infection. Elena's medical training was minimal. Basic first aid. She knew enough to recognize sepsis. The red line traveling up her leg was blood poisoning. If it reached her torso, her organs would start failing. She had maybe 2 days before it became critical. She needed to clean the wound, needed antiseptic, had neither. Salt water could help, but might not be enough. She thought about what else was available. Seaweed. Some species had antibacterial properties. She'd studied them in graduate school. Which species? Her mind felt sluggish from dehydration. Brown algae. Kelp. They contained fucoidan, a compound with antimicrobial effects. Did any grow in these tide pools? She'd have to check. Elena forced herself to stand. The movement made her leg throb. Each step sent jolts of pain up to her hip. She limped out of the cave into late afternoon sun. The solar still. She'd forgotten to check it. She made her way to the eastern side of the island, moving slowly. When she reached the still, she knelt beside it and carefully lifted the cover. Water droplets clung to the underside of the neoprene. The shell below held maybe 3 tablespoons of water. Clear, fresh. It worked. The still actually worked. Elena wanted to cry again. Couldn't. She lifted the shell carefully and brought it to her lips. The water was warm, but tasted clean. No salt. She drank half, forcing herself to stop. Save the rest for later. 3 tablespoons wouldn't save her life, but it proved the concept. She replaced the shell and recovered the still. Then she continued to the tide pools. Her leg was getting worse. She could feel it. The infection spreading, heat radiating from the wound. The first tide pool had mostly rock and urchins. The second had small crabs. The third, deeper than the others, had what she was looking for: brown seaweed clinging to the rocks underwater. She didn't know if it was the right species, but doing something was better than doing nothing. Elena reached into the cold water and pulled up a handful of seaweed. The fronds were slippery and smelled strongly of the ocean. She carried them back to her cave, her leg screaming with every step. Inside the cave, she examined the seaweed. It looked right. Brown, leathery texture. This was a gamble. If she was wrong about the species, it might do nothing, or make things worse. She used her sharp rock to mash the seaweed into a paste. The process took 20 minutes. Her hands cramped. When the paste was ready, she spread it directly onto the infected wound. The pain was instant and excruciating, like rubbing broken glass into raw flesh. Elena bit down on her wetsuit to keep from screaming. The pain lasted 30 seconds, then slowly faded to a deep ache. She wrapped a strip of torn neoprene around her thigh to hold the poultice in place. Now she waited. Either the seaweed would help, or it wouldn't. For 15 years, she'd been in control, planning research, managing teams, making decisions. Now she was at the mercy of bacteria and volcanic rock and her own failing body. The fever hit that night. Elena felt it building as the sun went down. First came the chills, violent shaking that made her teeth chatter. She curled into a ball on the cave floor. The shaking made her ribs scream, made the wound throb harder. Then the heat came. Her skin burned. Sweat poured off her, wasting precious fluids she couldn't afford to lose. The cave walls seemed to pulse and breathe. She knew that wasn't real, knew it was the fever. Knowing didn't make it stop. Hours passed. Maybe. Time became elastic. Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. During the lucid moments, she forced herself to crawl to the cave entrance and drink from the shell of water. 3 sips. 4. Had to stay hydrated. The hallucination started around midnight. She saw Jake standing at the cave entrance, dripping wet, asking why she hadn't waited for him. She tried to tell him she tried to save him, but her mouth wouldn't form words. He faded like smoke. Her father came next. He'd been dead for 23 years, but he looked exactly as she remembered, wearing his fishing vest. "Ellie," he said, using her childhood nickname. "You've got to fight harder than this." "I'm trying," Elena whispered. "I'm so tired, Dad." "I know, but you don't get to quit. That's not how I raised you." He knelt beside her. "Remember when you fell off the dock and hit your head? You were 7. The water was freezing and you were bleeding, but you swam to shore anyway. You survived because you didn't panic." Elena remembered. The cold water, the blood in her eyes, the fear, but also the determination. Keep swimming. Get to shore. Don't stop. This is the same. her father said. "You're hurt and scared and you want to give up. But you don't quit. You survive." Elena reached for him, but her hand passed through air. He was gone. She was alone again in the dark cave with fever burning through her body. But something had changed. She'd been wallowing, waiting to see if the infection killed her. That wasn't survival. That was surrender. She needed to fight back. The seaweed poultice was a start, but not enough. She needed more food, more water, more rest. She needed to change the poultice regularly, keep the wound clean. Elena sat up slowly. The cave spun. She waited for it to stabilize. Her fever was still high, but her mind was clearing. Dawn was starting to lighten the sky outside. She'd survived the night. She crawled to the cave entrance and looked at her leg in the growing light. The wound was still angry and red, but the red line hadn't advanced. It was the same length as yesterday. The infection wasn't getting worse. Maybe the seaweed was working. Maybe her immune system was fighting back. She'd bought herself time. Elena spent the morning in a routine that kept her alive. First, collect dew before the sun burned it off. She found 8 rock depressions this time. Each one held a few tablespoons. Together, maybe half a cup. She drank it all, slowly. Next, check the solar still. It had collected another 3 tablespoons overnight. She drank that too. Her urine was still dark, but not as dark as yesterday. Progress. Food came next. 2 more sea urchins from the tide pools. She was getting efficient at cracking them open. She ate them mechanically, ignoring the salt taste. Calories. Protein. The fish in the tide pools had learned to avoid her spear. Elena needed a new strategy. Create a trap instead of hunting actively. Use rocks to block most of the pool exits. Leave one gap. Position herself there. Elena spent an hour moving rocks, building her trap. The work exhausted her. She had to rest every few minutes. But she kept going. When the trap was set, she stirred the water with her spear. The fish panicked and bolted for the exit. She caught 2 on the first try. She cleaned the fish and ate them raw. Her stomach had stopped rebelling against the texture. The human body could adapt to almost anything if survival depended on it. With food and water handled, Elena turned her attention to the infection. She removed the seaweed poultice. The wound looked slightly better. Still red, still swollen, but the angry heat had diminished. She cleaned the wound with salt water, then applied fresh seaweed paste. The red line up her leg hadn't advanced. That meant her immune system was winning. Elena assessed her overall condition. Dehydrated, but functional. Infected, but fighting it off. Hungry, but fed. She'd been on the island for 3 days now. No rescue boats had appeared. No planes. The volcano was still active. Nobody was looking for her. Nobody even knew she was alive. She couldn't wait for rescue. She needed to signal actively. Create something visible from the air or sea. But what? She had no materials for a fire. No mirror. No bright-colored material. Just black volcanic rock and grey ash. Wait. Contrast. The entire island was dark. If she could create something light-colored, it would stand out. The solar still used neoprene from her wetsuit. The inside of the neoprene was lighter than the outside. If she cut more pieces and laid them out in a pattern, arranged them to spell SOS, it might be visible, but that meant sacrificing the rest of her wetsuit. No protection from sun or cold. Complete exposure. The trade-off was brutal. Elena looked at the torn neoprene around her leg, looked at the grey sky where rescue might come from. Comfort didn't matter. Only survival mattered, and survival meant being found. She started cutting. It took 3 hours to cut the remaining wetsuit into usable pieces. The neoprene was thick, and her sharp rock kept slipping. Her hands cramped so badly she had to stop every 10 minutes to rest them. but she kept working. By noon, she had 8 pieces of material, each about 2 feet square. The inside surface was grey-white, much lighter than the black volcanic rock. She carried them to the highest point on the island, the rocky outcrop where she'd first surveyed her prison. The climb made her dizzy. Her infected leg throbbed with each step. She had to stop twice to catch her breath, but she made it. At the top, she arranged the neoprene pieces in a large X pattern. Each piece was weighted down with rocks at the corners to keep the wind from blowing them away. The X measured roughly 12 feet across, not huge, but visible from the air if anyone flew over. Day 7 started with a storm. Elena woke to rain hammering the island. She scrambled out of the cave and tilted her head back, let the water hit her face, her mouth, her cracked lips. It tasted like ash and minerals, but it was fresh water, real, drinkable, life-saving water. She grabbed every container she had, the shells from the tide pools, the rock depressions, even cupped her hands and drank directly. The rain fell hard for 20 minutes, soaking her completely. She'd never felt anything better. When the rain stopped, she'd collected maybe 3 cups of water total, more than she'd managed in the previous 6 days combined. She drank half immediately. The rest she saved, distributed among the rock depressions, covered with flat stones. The rain had scattered her signal. Elena climbed to the outcrop. The neoprene pieces were displaced. She found 6 of the 8 pieces. 2 were gone, probably blown into the ocean. Elena dragged the remaining pieces back to the outcrop. Her hands were bleeding from the sharp rock. Her body was exhausted. But she repositioned the signal, this time creating letters. SOS. 3 letters, 9 feet tall each. She used twice as many rocks to hold them down. When she finished, she sat and looked at her work. The signal was crude, might not be visible from high altitude, but it was something. Elena scanned the horizon. The volcano had stopped erupting. The ash clouds were dissipating. She could see the larger islands more clearly now. The ocean was calmer. That meant search and rescue operations could resume. If anyone was looking for the coral star, now was when they'd find debris. Now was when they might spot her signal. Movement caught her eye. Far to the north, maybe 5 miles away, a boat. Small, moving slowly along the outer islands. Fishing vessel, probably. Elena stood and waved her arms. Shouted. Knew they couldn't possibly hear her. The boat continued on its path, moving away. She watched until it disappeared. Her first potential rescue in 7 days, and it hadn't even come close. Elena sat back down. The infection, the dehydration, the constant survival effort. It was all catching up to her. She'd been running on adrenaline and determination. Now both were fading. She needed rescue soon. Not eventually. Soon. Another week on this island might kill her, even if the infection didn't. Elena forced herself to stand. No time for despair. She had work to do. Check the solar still. Collect more food. Change the wound dressing. Maintain the signal. Keep surviving until someone found her or her body gave out. The sound woke her on day 9. A rhythmic thumping that didn't belong to the ocean or the volcano. Elena opened her eyes, confused. She was in the cave. The sun was high, midday. The sound got louder, mechanical, rotating blades. Helicopter. Elena scrambled out of the cave so fast she forgot about her injured leg. Pain shot through her thigh and she collapsed. Didn't matter. She dragged herself upright and looked up. There, to the east, a white helicopter with orange markings. Indonesian search and rescue, flying a search pattern over the outer islands, maybe 2 miles away. They'd reach her island in minutes. Elena ran, limped, stumbled toward the outcrop where her signal was. Her legs screamed, her vision blurred. She pushed through it. She reached the outcrop gasping. The SOS letters were still there. But were they visible enough? The helicopter was closer now, maybe a mile out. She could see it clearly. Elena waved her arms over her head, jumped despite the agony in her leg, screamed until her throat was raw. The helicopter continued its pattern, moving closer, but not changing course. They hadn't seen her yet. Fire. Smoke would be visible for miles, but she had nothing to burn, just volcanic rock and seaweed. Elena half ran, half fell down the outcrop toward the nearest tide pool, grabbed handfuls of seaweed, draped it over hot rocks in the sun. It needed to dry, but how to start the fire? No matches, no lighter. Her dive watch, the cracked crystal. It was curved, might work as a crude lens. Elena smashed the watch against a rock. The crystal popped free. She held it up, angling it toward the sun. A point of focused light appeared on the rock below. She grabbed the driest seaweed and positioned it under the light point. The helicopter was half a mile away now, still hadn't changed course. 30 seconds before it passed her island. The seaweed started smoking. A thin wisp. Elena held the lens steady. The smoke increased. A small ember glowed. She blew on it gently. The ember grew. The seaweed caught fire. Elena added more. The fire spread. Smoke rose, thick and dark against the grey sky. The helicopter changed course, turned toward her island. The pilot had seen the smoke. Elena kept feeding the fire, tears streaming down her face. From relief so intense it hurt. The helicopter circled once, twice. Then it descended. There was no good landing spot. The helicopter hovered 20 feet above the beach, and a man in a rescue harness descended on a cable. He touched down and unclipped himself. Elena tried to walk toward him. Her legs gave out. She fell to her knees. The rescuer ran to her, speaking rapid Indonesian. She didn't understand the words, but understood the tone. "You're safe now." He wrapped a thermal blanket around her and spoke into his radio. Elena heard her own name. Dr. Elena Martinez. Survivor located. Medical attention required. The rescuer examined her leg wound, saw the infection, the makeshift seaweed treatment. He looked at her with something like awe. "How long have you been here?" 9 days, Elena croaked. "Alone?" She nodded. He shook his head slowly. "Nobody else from your vessel survived. We found wreckage 3 days ago. Everyone thought..." He didn't finish. Everyone thought she was dead. She should have been dead. 9 days alone on a volcanic rock with no supplies, no fresh water, an infected wound. But she had survived. The hospital in Lombok smelled like antiseptic and clean sheets. Elena had been there for 3 days. IV fluids had rehydrated her. Antibiotics had knocked back the infection. Real food had started rebuilding her strength. The doctors said she was lucky. Another 2 days on that island, and the infection would have gone systemic. Organ failure. Death. Lucky. That's what they called it. Elena stared at the ceiling and thought about Jake and Yuki and Captain Samir. They hadn't been lucky. Their bodies had washed up on different islands. Jake on a beach 30 miles north. Yuki tangled in mangroves. Samir still in the wreckage of the Coral Star. She'd survived, and they hadn't. The doctors talked about her resilience, her intelligence, her will to live. The news media had picked up the story. They wanted interviews, wanted to know how she'd done it. Elena didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to be a survival story. She wanted her team back, wanted to undo the decision to ignore Yuki's warnings. But she couldn't. She could only move forward. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. A woman entered, mid-50s, wearing casual clothes. "Dr. Martinez, I'm Sarah Chen, Jake's mother." Elena's stomach dropped. She tried to sit up. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to the warnings. Sarah held up her hand. Stop. I didn't come here for an apology. She pulled a chair close. I came to thank you. Thank me. Your son is dead because of me. My son died doing what he loved. He talked about you constantly, about your research, about how much he was learning. Sarah's eyes were red but dry. Jake made a choice to be on that boat. He knew the risks. But I ignored the warnings. You made the best decision you could with the information you had. And when everything went wrong, you survived. That matters. Jake would want you to keep going. Keep doing the research. Elena shook her head. I don't know if I can. You can. You survived 9 days alone on volcanic rock. You figured out how to find water, catch food, treat an infection with seaweed. You built a solar still and a signal fire. You did all of that because you refused to quit. Sarah leaned forward. Don't quit now. They sat in silence. Then Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Jake wanted to give you this. He bought it in Jakarta before the trip. She opened the box. Inside was a simple pendant, a silver DNA helix. He said you always talked about how life finds a way, how organisms adapt and survive against impossible odds. He thought you'd like it. Elena took the pendant with shaking hands. Life finds a way. She'd said that in a dozen lectures. Never thought she'd have to prove it personally. Thank you, Elena whispered. Sarah stood to leave. Jake kept a journal. I read it after. She cleared her throat. He wrote about you, about how you taught him that science isn't just about data. It's about asking questions that matter. He wanted to be like you. She left. Elena was alone again with her thoughts and the silver pendant and the weight of survival. 3 months later, Elena stood in front of a lecture hall at the University of Jakarta. 200 students watched her. New semester, new research assistants, new projects, but also old memories. She touched the pendant under her shirt, took a breath, started talking. Life finds a way. That's what I used to tell my students, but I didn't really understand it until I had to live it. She told them about the island, about the solar still, and the seaweed medicine, and the signal fire, about 9 days of choosing to survive when giving up would have been easier. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and share it. It helps the next person find their way here.